Cool. Hey, and welcome to another Forensic Happy Hour. Really excited. Should be some, I don't know the word shenanigans, but should be a great time talking about some digital forensics stuff with Eric Zimmerman. So, extremely excited. So, it'll be good, fun. Hopefully, you guys enjoy it. So, without further ado, we'll wind up coming on to it. And here we go. So typically on the Forensic Happy Hour, Eric, I say cheers. And
Cheers. I got a Diet Coke this time, but
I love it. Fantastic. Thank you very much.
you got it.
And as I say, when we have the conversation, I don't want to take too much of your time. So it depends. So I won't try to milk this.
Sure.
I'll try to, you know, keep up with the Joneses. So really, I want to thank you for kind of being on this. But first off, before I tell you how I remember you, so tell everyone who's Eric Zimmerman. Give it. What do you do?
Uh, I make digital forensic tools. I would say that's probably how at least most people in this industry are going to know me for what's commonly referred to as the Easy Tools suite. Which initials, and they're relatively easy to use depending on what you're doing. And so that's probably the one of the reasons why. So I've written a bunch of different open source tools. The vast majority of them are completely open source. The graphical user interface ones, not so much, not because there's some magic secret sauce, but you'd need to spend a lot of money to get the third-party controls to compile it. So
Right.
very few people would be willing to do that. My full-time job is I work for Kroll, and we're a cyber incident response company. I will work the perimeters of cases, but my primary role day to day is like R&D, infrastructure development, how to improve our processes, figuring out how we could do things at scale so that we're not just kind of building all these little silos that we can't just, we got this small amount, how do we go into a big amount? It should just be able to increase.
Right.
So things like that. And prior to that, I was an FBI agent for 8 years
Yeah.
in Salt Lake City. So 2007 to 2015,
Yeah.
I was out there, and that's pretty much where I cut my teeth, really getting into forensics, more of a moving away from just I like to use computers, and to actually looking at the underpinnings of how Windows works and what this stuff looks like on disk, and just trying to understand it as much as possible. So
Yeah, and I think it was when you were in law enforcement. Me being obviously prior to law enforcement, then I moved to Access Data after that when I had a training company, and I think it was during that time that I specifically remember you, and and the reason being because a sergeant that we had on our SOU team, you're like a doppelganger. So and it's one of those things that is anyway. It stuck on it, and your name continues to come up. Obviously in the digital forensic circles, and one of the things that I see is really this the Kroll, the artifact parser and extractor. I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, that's one of my newer ones. It's a bit of a departure for me, only because it wasn't one that I wrote and gave away. And so the way that one came about is when I came on board at Kroll, we had some of this kind of these tools where we could just point it at a data set and it would do a bunch of stuff. But it had some limitations. And like most things, if you just kind of keep if you keep yourself real close to the process, you kind of lose sight from where you need to go. And you can walk yourself into a corner that you're gonna have to back out a little bit to then have a little bit more of a holistic view as to what you should be doing. And so I took what we had and saw the good, saw the bad, and basically re-engineered what we were doing, keeping in line with kind of the historical stuff of what I've done when I was with the FBI, my OS triage stuff, which is still around. So I kind of went from version 1, which was this just single executable, monolithic. If you want updates, you get the whole thing. No way for you to extend it. That was version 1. Well, then with version 2, I kind of started thinking and just becoming a better programmer and thinking more, well, how could we make this, like, I don't want to be involved as much. If somebody wants to extend it, I should be able to decouple myself from that in case I get hit by a bus. I just am bored. I don't want to do it, whatever. And so version 2 basically started separating the functionality from the interface. And so all of the plugins and you want to parse graphics or look at the registry, it was all modular. It was just DLLs. And so I came up with a set of interfaces that you had to follow, but then anybody could write their own code, which is great, but it's still pretty limiting, right? The subset of DFIR people that can code is going to be a lot smaller than people that can use a text editor, which is where Cape comes in. And I kind of stepped back again and I said, well, how can I make this even easier? And went away from having to do any programming at all and just very simple YAML configuration that now anybody could say, I have a .foo file I need to collect. Nobody else in the world might have that need. I don't say it like, don't take it. I don't care if you have that need. It doesn't matter to me. If you want to use it that way, go for it.
Right.
And so I designed it in such a way that you don't even need to tell me. Make a new file, test it. If you get the syntax right, all the properties are there, it's going to go off and do its thing all day long. So sometimes I like to say, well, Cape is kind of like OS Triage 4, right? 3 or 4. But it expects the user to have a better understanding of what they want to collect and what they want to process and then how to analyze it. Whereas a tool like OS Triage, lots of different artifacts, very streamlined, consistent view because the audience is different, right?
Yeah, and I've had several conversations just on this show, but then obviously in person or over email of really kind of the transition of really building your own to say satisfy the need. Because say a commercial tool, whatever commercial tool that you have, is limited, right? It's programmed, it's developed by man for certain needs, right? Then it's put in a box. Whereas you might have an application, if we're talking about mobile devices, you might have an application that drops that day, a 0-day app that no one's supporting it. But obviously the tools, you can go in and build your own really build your own say SQL parsers or other types of parsers. So I think from what I'm seeing, and obviously there's a need for these type of, not necessarily, don't want to say bolt-on, but allows people to solve a solution that they need now and not have to wait for, say, a tool to catch up with it.
Yeah.
I mean, does that sound about right?
Absolutely, and that kind of pivots from the Cape side, which is more odd. I like to call them tool chains, where you can come up with a consistent way to collect certain things and process certain things so that you just deal with output. Right. Like every single time you say, here's my data, give me the results here, and it goes. Now, you mentioned one thing specifically, especially about mobile devices and more desktops. Things are starting to show up in SQLite databases.
Right.
And so one of my newest programs that I was just on the forensic lunch for is called SQLe CMD. It was essentially designed around exactly what you just said.
Right.
If you discover a change in schema, a new database, and you're like, fill in the blank big vendor, I need support for this. They're like, it's on the map. We'll see you in the next quarter. Well, that doesn't do you any good. And schema changes, new versions, you don't like their naming convention. And so I figured out a way to, and this isn't it's brand new, Eric thought of this. It's a continuation of things that have been done in the past, and then I've added my own twist to it. Right. And so you just follow simple YAML rules where you do the SQL. You can validate the schema using another part of this process so that, and this is really what differentiates my approach from others. Let's say that you have a phone. You do a new check rain or whatever it is. You get a physical dump off of a phone or you carve SQLite. You might not have any idea what those databases are. Maybe the name's different because it was carved or whatever. Well, my tool has a hunting mode that you could point at that data source and it will walk through all the files, look at the headers, and if it identifies this is SQLite, it will then run all of the maps that you've created to try and figure out what it is. And once it finds, this is, let's say, Skype, right? It's main DB, but somebody called it not Skype.db. It'll identify that based on the schema and then start dumping out your chats, your files, your this, your that. And so if it finds SQLite databases that it doesn't know what to do with, it reports all those at the bottom. It says, I don't have maps for these. Here's a listing of all the tables. so that you can explore it. So if a new app does come out, that's the most amazing forensic thing that anybody's ever looked at, but never knew it was there. This is a proactive way to go in there and systematically find changes and new data sources for us to start mining some of these nuggets, if you will, for forensic artifacts.
Right, and I think that to me, I guess, is the most important. A statement to tell to tell people, right? A lot of times that you might have, with the open source community, isn't necessarily a rebellion against the community or say commercial tools, right? I see it as a complement really to a commercial tool because again, like you said, you have an event that you need to deal with now and not wait for say the evolution or a release or the RC to come out or something that you can. It's so do you, I mean, is that something that the way that you look at it? Because there's a lot of I don't want to say animosity, but some people say that that might be on the commercial side of it. Oh, you know what? Well, this open source, it's just because people don't want to pay those high prices. I mean, what
Sure.
do you think, right?
I have absolutely all of my stuff I have given away forever. But if anybody wants to send me money so that you feel better about using my stuff,
Right.
I'll give you my PayPal. And I have Patreon and GitHub sponsors. The offers aren't rolling in.
Right.
So
Right.
if paying for something is how you equate value, maybe
Right.
And I've had that conversation with very large federal law enforcement agencies
Right.
with three initials I won't mention.
Right.
There seems to be this notion of if you don't pay for it,
I agree.
we can't use it.
I agree. So I've actually
which is
had
interesting.
people say in other countries that you go and have a conversation with them and they're like, well, no. If I'm not paying for it, it must not be that good. If there isn't some monetary figure that's huge, then people aren't. It must not be that good. If they wouldn't give it away for free, which obviously is completely far from the truth, right? Because what you do, what Alex, these people that go in and build say iLeap and all of these tools aren't necessarily okay. Well, because we want people to have the option to use a free tool. It has nothing to do with that in my mind, right? It has everything to do with providing something to the community to fill a gap, right? On those with triage, being able to go in and gather the information that you need immediately to make, get actionable intelligence that you need now instead of waiting a day for it to process. Does that?
Yeah,
I mean, does that sound right?
exactly. One of the things that I say whenever I teach pretty much anything, like if time doesn't matter, time doesn't matter. Who cares how fast or slow, or if it takes me 6 hours to make an E01? But if there's a kid missing, a bomb's going to go off, like if there's a critical event, time now matters. And I have to figure out ways to prioritize devices and data to be able to move the ball forward as quick as possible. And sometimes if you have tools that are developed to be configurable by an end user and somebody is just creative and can say, wait a minute, if we look at this from a slightly different angle, we're going to have some more options. I mean, my philosophy with the open source side of things is twofold. One, having law enforcement experience, I would hate to put a price tag on my stuff and then somebody goes, man, I would really like to use this. It's too much. Can't get it and could have rescued a child, solved a crime. Like, to me, that would be tragic. Now, I get it. Businesses they're there to make money, or else it's just not going to work. But the other aspect of it, at least for me, and I would think for other people that write open source tools, like there's no better way to learn an artifact than to write a parser from scratch.
Right.
Like I know every single, and certainly not. I'm not saying I know everything about any artifact, but I know every single byte I have looked at and dealt with and extracted and noodled and said, how does this affect that? From link files to jump lists to MFT, because one, I wanted to understand it better, but then I don't know of anybody short of wanting to learn a format that would say, there's this really amazing tool out here. I'm going to write my own tool. It's not nearly as good, and then I'm going to give it away. Right? So put tools out there that add features, add functionality, and then hopefully man, that is a really good idea, and then
Right.
maybe you just keep raising the bar as much as possible, and everybody wins.
So let me bring this up because this is something that I've kind of been always kind of on the soapbox side of it, is that because what you do and what I have done, I write code, I still do have done that even when on the law enforcement side of it, kind of the same way, right? Is to solve an issue that I had of building this script because obviously I needed to have it. So to me, but in doing that, right? So it's like going back to NWC way back in the day in a basic class of computer forensics, right? Taking the header to the footer and saying, "Wow, I have a cat." Right? So being able to carve that out, you're now like, "Wow, I kind of get this and how this automated tool works." And so now if you're building and you're writing the code to parse the database, to parse the JSON file, to pull all this information together, to me it makes you a better examiner, and it makes you able to testify to what's really occurring, because the worst thing you can do is someone says, "Oh, fantastic, man, that was probably outstanding, man. You pushed it came out. So explain to me, man, where did that come from? What's that cool stuff?"
Yeah,
I don't know.
I
Right?
push the
So
button.
yeah, so to me, I mean, it's extremely important, and like you had said, there's only a handful of people that are say, writing code or writing Python scripts or being able to put this stuff together. But to me, I think that that's taking off because I think that the understanding of having to understand what's going on is really gained momentum. I mean, would you
Yeah.
agree with that?
Yeah, and that's certainly another one of the things that I always try to harp on when I'm teaching is, like, I don't want to teach you how to use a tool. We're going to get there, but before we talk about the how, let's talk about the what. What does this data look like on the hard drive? What is its purpose? I want you to be able to read between the lines so that when the tool doesn't give you the result that you are expecting based on your training and experience, you are aware of it to be able to pivot and then not be caught saying, there was no answer. We couldn't find any evidence. And then somebody else who does understand the data better comes along and says, well, I ran this other tool and I looked at it in a hex editor, and clearly, Your Honor, you could see, like, devastating. And
Right.
former law enforcement, that's a little bit more of a gut punch than
Right.
you've not
For
had
sure.
to deal with that.
Yeah.
But the more we can, as a community, take a step back and understand the data, now we have a chance to better understand the tools that are processing the data to give us output.
I agree.
And seeing when things fail.
Yeah, I agree. And so again, talking about obviously the training that you do, and hey, eventually we're going to get there. I mean, a story of again going back to Pedra, kind of getting that stuff, that basic the computer forensic side of it. 5 days. You're just carving through the hex. We're using Norton Disk Editor, and it's like crazy. We're just boom going through that, and we're just kind of upset, right? Because you're like, are you kidding me? But this is great. We're super excited. And then the last day they like FTK and encase to use, and you carve it out, and you're like, seriously?
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, you're upset for a second, but
Yeah.
then you start to think back. You're like, I know exactly how it did that.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, it's. I mean, that was a while ago, and I'm sure that you're aware of this, especially the training that you have had as well. Is that it's progressed a lot slower, I think, as in the understanding, because 15, 20 years, that's a long time in the progression, and I think we are starting to, again, this is personal opinion, thinking that we are starting to do a lot better instead of just specifically tool training. Yeah, this is how it goes. Push this, and boom, you're an expert. Rather than really giving someone a firm foundation where they understand what's really going on, and then being able to say, okay, yeah, here's the tool. You can utilize the tool here.
Yeah, I don't want to train people. Like, I'm a Miss Sands instructor and do training with Kroll. I don't want to teach you how to use a tool.
Right.
I don't want you to be an expert at a tool. I want you to be a digital forensics expert that can use a tool to accomplish a task. And if that tool becomes interchangeable, oh, great. Well, because you always have to consider the fact, well, what if I don't have that tool and yet I still need to answer a question? We need to be flexible. Even if you end up like, whatever, I have nothing else, I'm going to load this thing into a hex editor and see if I could find a meaningful string or something.
Right.
So tearing it down and going from not automated and then we automate up, like, people, you force that progression. But if you start with the automation And you're like, now I want you to understand how it really works. Like people are like,
They're
no,
like,
I'm just
yeah,
going to
no,
start here.
sorry,
Yeah.
yeah, why should I? Why
Yeah.
should I? I think I'm right here, and that's exactly, I term that the backward approach to mobile forensics, right? In kind of that learning and that side of it, but
Mm-hmm.
really go through really anything in the
Mm-hmm.
cybersecurity or any type of intrusion work or a pen test or any of that, right? Is that kind of understanding really what's going on before you're here's what's going on type of thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? So let me move on to something else. I mean, fantastic conversation. So what what are you? I guess I'm sure you're proud of a lot of stuff, and taking the family side out of it. But what have you done? I guess on with the community side of it is that you put up there and say, you know what, I am extremely proud of that for the community, for the say the digital forensic community.
Well, I mean, from a forensics perspective, I think my Easy Tool suite on the Now, I'm a Windows specialist, admit it, right? And I'm a C# programmer, right? There's reasons why I picked that. I mean, a lot of times, you should use Python because cross-platform. Like, there's certain reasons why I've made certain decisions. So I focused on Windows. I tried to give the community the best tools that I know how to make that certainly do different things. And I hear from people all the time, I use your software to either like validate other tools or find additional things that other things aren't. And so I would say just the Easy Tool suite in general, I'm proud of. I'm proud of how CAPE came together, and I'm proud to have developed it as an internal tool that Kroll really had no thought to just be able to give it away. And
Yeah.
so once it was done, I approached my management and I'm like, hey, here's what I think we should do with this. Let's just give it away. Right now, it's not free for everybody everywhere. If you use it for commercial purposes, there's you have to talk to us about licensing, and it's not expensive for what you're getting. But for education, internal incident response, state, local, federal, government, military, like the vast majority of people, 100% free, like go make your life easier kind of a thing. So I was proud of that aspect too. And of course, that kind of is just the whole ecosystem. Um,
Right.
yeah, I mean, it's just fun to be able to build tools that makes people's jobs easier. That's one
Right.
aspect. But the
Right.
other side is, who are those people helping? Who
Right.
are the kids that are getting rescued from all this horrific stuff that goes on? Like that's the real payoff. That's the
Yeah.
thing. Even though I'll never get to meet them, I know it's made a difference,
Yeah.
and that can be extended to national security. Like, yeah, great. We have all these problems that are being solved from a law enforcement national security perspective, but like I've always had that drive, that desire to see the ball move forward on child exploitation stuff, just because it was something I did and was passionate about.
Right. Right.
So that would really, I would say, is kind of the pillar of it, being able to do stuff like that and help people out.
Yeah. So obviously with the whole stay at home and all that great stuff, I mean, that we all are doing, and this really kind of started this whole forensic happy hour kind of started just so that I wanted to talk to people. I mean, see that we're all human. We all have conversations, and so tell me, I guess. As part of this, from a work side of it, what do you think is really going to be the outcome, as in, say, digital forensics side? Do you think that people are more aware of, say, the things they're doing on computers? Because obviously people are doing a lot of things, whether it be Zoom, whether it be a lot of communication, whether it be work from home. Because I think a lot of people are going to now be permanently working from home because of businesses.
Yeah.
What do you foresee as in, say, an instant response to this? Do you think that and see that it's going to go up, maintain the same? What do you think?
It's an interesting, like, historically, when there wasn't a lot of work from home, you really had these two enclaves, right? You had the office and then you had home. Well, now with stuff getting pulled back, if you didn't have things set up in your business such that you could still maintain some type of separation, now you might have people doing business on personal computers or vice versa, which could potentially cause problems if VPNs and all the other stuff. So I think there's a concern there. I certainly also think that the bar has been raised at least some degree with, as you mentioned, this explosion with Zoom and the other types of programs like that it's saying this, but when we look at it, there's privacy issues. And then the whole Zoom bombing,
Right.
like it was a platform, but as soon as something becomes super popular, blood in the water,
Without
you're going to
a
get
doubt.
attackers there. And so now we're starting to see a little bit of a step back where they're trying to like address them. To their credit, they're starting to address some of these things. So it's one of those things. I mean, I think a lot of places dealt with it pretty well, pivoting and being a little bit agile. But I'm sure that there was a large percentage, especially of the old guard to a degree, that are and probably were and still are like, we can't be doing this remote stuff.
Right.
You know that they're off, outside for 7 hours, and we don't know what they're doing. Right. So it's just a change in philosophy. If work's getting done and you have relationships with people, you can have that kind of an arrangement and still be successful. I mean, Kroll's been that way. I've always worked from home. I don't know if I've ever been in an office except for like the orientation in New Jersey. Every other day I've always been, it's remote, and the remote is wherever you want to be. Yeah. So I think it's a good thing, especially for tech people. One of the really interesting things, I'd like your thoughts on this too. Some of the stuff like that's going on in California, where that's classically been like this epicenter, crazy expensive. People have been expected to live there, and now with this, like, wow, the business is continuing. Yep. You can live anywhere you want, but we're going to cut your pay unless you live in, San Jose.
Right. Yeah.
That's like maybe an unforeseen consequence of it.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, for sure. For sure. And I think that you're exactly right. And I talked to this because you're going to see it. I mean, I promise you, because businesses are seeing, the Microsofts. If you're looking in Washington, if you go to Silicon Valley, even with Twitter, and you start talking about these companies that are seeing, wow, my expenses are gone down really low. Mm-hmm. I mean, but we're still productive. I'm having people working remote. So I really honestly see a lot of those companies, sheer monetary reasons, mm-hmm. Saying, we're going to take our rent costs down, and I'm going to have someone work from Boise, Idaho, or from Denver, Colorado, or from Texas. And it's like they're working from the offices of Silicon Valley. And quite honestly, California doesn't need people leaving any more than they already are. Mm-hmm. And I feel that, the economy will shift, I think, in a negative way if obviously these businesses are not operating out of there. Mm-hmm. So I mean, that's even talk about the brick and mortars in Virginia, right? Or in anywhere in the world that people mm-hmm. have found out, wow, my employees have been pretty productive. We're seeing the bottom line is staying relatively the same, and our expenses are going down. Mm-hmm. So, maybe this is a good thing.
Yeah.
So quite honestly, I think will completely change, just like conferences. Mm-hmm. Conferences are going to find out, like, hey, we can still have a vendor do a virtual booth, and we can still charge them X amount of dollars. And we're going to get 10 times the number of attendees mm-hmm. that we usually have. So, I think the world will change as we know it on the business side of it. It doesn't matter forensic side of it or not. I think that there's going to be more cases. But as for businesses, I really think that there's going to be a lot of empty buildings.
Mm-hmm. And the only one, well, not the only, but there's pros and cons, and things are going to move around. One of the things that I think that can be to some degree a negative is just a lack of being in the same room. Like that's different. To sit down with somebody and be in the same physical space and be able to have a conversation, or be like, hey, I'm going to go talk to so and so over here.
Agreed.
There's just a human element there that even though I can see you and I know you're a person and you're 2D, yeah, right? Exactly. It's just different. And yep. I have friends, I talk to them all the time online, but when you get together, it's just different, right? Yep. The whole notion 100%. of the hotel lobby conference, right, can be as beneficial or more than, because you just network and exactly. That's nice, I've heard of you. That I think might be things that suffer a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think for sure. I think it really evolve. Does. Yeah, it is, and I think that it's going to be, there'll have to be a fine line, obviously, mm-hmm. to doing this, because again, the human factor of having a conversation, one to one, or with a group that you can actually look at, their real eyes. and be able to have a conversation and understand that. I think that still has to exist.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, again, unfortunately, the world revolves around typically how much a company is going to make, and if unfortunately,
Yeah.
but again, it comes down to, I guess, being active and being
Mhm.
continually active in the community,
Yeah.
like you have been, and like a lot of people. So have you seen really a pickup of a lot of people working, on, I mean, a lot of code, writing all this great stuff, posting everything, because do you think it's just because we have more time or we're just bored?
I I don't. I'm sure there's part of it, especially with, well, you have your work day, but then it's
Right.
like, okay, how much stuff can I do here? I have extra time. I can't go out and do the things I normally would do. Maybe now I can sit down and pour it. Yeah. So
Right.
absolutely. I mean, there's clearly been an inordinate amount of time that's been spent indoors due to the nature of COVID and all the other
Right.
stuff. Yeah. I mean, it
Right.
makes sense. More
Right.
time in
Right.
front of the keyboard. And I get in the
Exactly.
whole negative side of that, but at least we're
Exactly.
seeing some new things come out of it too. So
Honestly. So
yeah,
anyway, I don't want to take any more of your time. I know you have some things to do. I want to say I so appreciate
that's been
you,
fun. Yeah.
you being on this, and so I'm going to do my ending here. Stay on, but I'm going to say cheers and thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Very good.
Appreciate it.
And see if I can work this out. Watch this. Got to grab the mouse. There we go. It's live. All right. Cool. So fantastic. I mean, great interview. I mean, amazing stuff. Make sure you follow and look at his Twitter. Make sure that you have on Eric's stuff. If you do want to be obviously on the Forensic Happy Hour, hey, send me a direct message. Send me an email. Would happy to have you on here so we can have a conversation. I do appreciate it, and thank you guys again. Have a great weekend.